My name is Akari. Since I was a little girl, America has always been my dream. The glittering big cities, the palpable sense of freedom in the air, and the promise of endless adventure. I saved every penny, worked day and night, all for that one plane ticket. A ticket to my dream. I pictured myself walking down Fifth Avenue, basking on California beaches, and dancing in noisy nightclubs. It all felt so close, so real. But who knew that what awaited me across the ocean would be so different from my sweetest dreams? A haunting nightmare that would shackle me, binding every inch of my body and soul. The descent was surprisingly gentle, a soft murmur of engines giving way to the familiar thud of landing gear. I gripped the armrests, a wide, almost childlike grin plastered across my face. Through the small oval window, I watched as the sprawling concrete jungle of Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, spread out beneath us, an endless mosaic of runways, terminals, and a surprising number of palm trees. America, I whispered to myself, the word a sweet, almost reverent melody on my tongue. After years of dreaming, saving, and meticulously planning every detail of this 2-week vacation, I was finally here. Akari, from the quiet streets of Kyoto, was about to conquer the land of Hollywood dreams and endless possibilities. The excitement was a tangible thing, a buzzing energy in my chest that made my heart pound with anticipation. As soon as the seatbelt sign clicked off, I practically leaped from my seat, eager to join the exodus of passengers. The cabin filled with the low hum of chatter in various languages, the rustle of carry-on bags, and the distinct scent of recycled airplane air. I pulled my small, brightly colored suitcase from the overhead bin, its lightness a testament to my efficient packing. Just essentials, leaving plenty of room for souvenirs. The walk through the terminal was a sensory overload. Bright, almost blinding fluorescent lights illuminated a maze of moving walkways, duty-free shops, and an astonishing array of people from every corner of the globe. English, of course, dominated the air, but I also caught snippets of Spanish, Mandarin, and even a familiar whisper of Japanese. My English, though practiced meticulously with online tutors and countless hours watching American dramas, felt a little hesitant in this bustling symphony of sound. Still, I held my head high, a confident smile fixed in place. I was ready for this. I followed the clear signs for immigration, and found myself in a cavernous hall, already packed with what seemed like hundreds of weary travelers. The air was thick with the faint scent of disinfectant and stale coffee. Long serpentine lines snaked around stanchions, each queue leading to a small booth manned by a uniformed officer. My stomach did a little flutter. This was it. The official welcome. I chose the shortest line, which still seemed to stretch for an eternity. Around me, families bickered softly, business travelers typed furiously on their phones, and young backpackers exchanged tired but excited glances. I fiddled with the strap of my small crossbody bag, ensuring my passport and visa documents were easily accessible. I'd triple-checked everything before leaving Japan. My ESTA approval, my hotel bookings in Hollywood and San Francisco, my meticulously planned itinerary, even a printout of my return ticket. There was absolutely nothing amiss. I was a model tourist, ready to embrace the American dream. When it was finally my turn, a tall, burly man with a neatly trimmed beard and an impassive expression gestured me forward. "Next," he grunted, his voice deeper than I expected. I approached the counter, offering my brightest, most polite smile. "Good morning," I said, trying to infuse my voice with cheerfulness despite the hours of travel. He didn't return the smile. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, scanned my passport with a disquieting intensity. He flipped through the pages, paused, then slowly, deliberately, looked up at me. His gaze felt like a physical touch, cold and penetrating. "Purpose of visit," he asked, his voice flat. Vacation, I replied promptly, perhaps a little too eagerly. 2 weeks. I plan to visit Los Angeles and San Francisco. I have all my bookings. I gestured vaguely towards my bag, ready to pull out the neatly organized folder. He didn't respond, his eyes still fixed on me. It was an unsettling silence, the kind that makes your skin prickle. And where will you be staying? The Hollywood Boulevard Hotel first, then the Hotel Zeta in San Francisco, I recited, proud of remembering the names perfectly. He typed something into his computer, the clicking of the keyboard strangely loud in the quiet booth. Then, he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping an octave. Are you traveling alone, Ms. Akari? Yes, I confirmed. Just me. His gaze sharpened. Have you traveled to the United States before? No, first time, I admitted. A flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher crossed his face. Suspicion. Disbelief. Do you know anyone in the United States? No, I don't, I said, feeling a prickle of unease. The questions were becoming more pointed than I'd anticipated. My friends who had traveled abroad had said immigration was usually quick and straightforward. He tapped a few more keys. Your occupation in Japan? I work as a graphic designer, I answered, trying to maintain my polite demeanor. My carefully constructed composure was beginning to fray at the edges. He picked up my passport again, scrutinizing my visa page. Your ESTA application states you are a tourist. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct, I said, my voice now noticeably softer. Why was he asking these obvious questions? He finally looked away from my passport, his gaze sweeping over my entire form, lingering for a moment on my slender frame, my simple but neat travel clothes. A shiver, not of cold, but of something far more unsettling, ran down my spine. It felt less like an inspection and more like an assessment. All right, Ms. Akari, he said, his tone still perfectly neutral, yet laced with an unidentifiable edge. Please step to the side. An officer will be with you shortly to ask a few more questions. He didn't return my passport. Instead, he slid a small white slip of paper across the counter. Just wait over there. His eyes flickered towards a separate, less populated area of the hall, near a nondescript door.
My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread. Just standard procedure, ma'am, he said, his gaze already moving to the next person in line. His dismissal was absolute. My legs felt heavy as I moved away from the counter, my mind racing. Standard procedure. I had never heard of this. I scanned the faces of other travelers, looking for reassurance, but everyone seemed preoccupied with their own cues. The small white slip felt like a condemnation. I walked towards the designated waiting area, a few rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs. There were about 10 other people already there, a mix of nationalities, all looking equally bewildered or resigned. A young man with tired eyes from what looked like India, an older couple speaking Russian, a woman with a child. No one spoke. The silence in this particular corner of the bustling airport was unnerving. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My initial unease was rapidly escalating into full-blown panic. What had I done wrong? Had I misunderstood something? Was there a mistake with my visa? My mind raced through every possible scenario, each more terrifying than the last. The vibrant dream of America was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a gray, anxious reality. Finally, after what felt like an hour, a woman in a crisp customs uniform approached the waiting area. She had stern features, pulled-back hair, and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her eyes swept over the group before landing on me. "Akari, Ms. Akari," she called out, her voice sharp and authoritative. Yes, I said, my voice coming out as a meek squeak. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly. Follow me, she commanded, not waiting for a response. I followed her towards the nondescript door I had noticed earlier. It looked like any other office door, plain and uninviting. As she pushed it open, a blast of colder air hit me. The room inside was small, stark, and utterly devoid of warmth. A single table with 2 chairs occupied the center, illuminated by a harsh overhead light. There were no windows, no distractions, just plain, beige walls. A large, one-way mirror dominated one side, making me feel as if I was already being watched. Sit, she instructed, pointing to one of the chairs. I obeyed, feeling my muscles tense. She then walked around the table and sat opposite me, her expression unreadable. Please hand over your passport and phone, Ms. Akari, she said, holding out a gloved hand. Her voice was calm, but the underlying authority was undeniable. My phone. I stammered, my heart leaping into my throat. My phone held everything. Photos, messages to my family, my travel apps. It was my lifeline. Yes, your phone. It's standard procedure for further inspection, she stated, her eyes unwavering. And any other electronic devices you may have. Reluctantly, my fingers fumbling, I unzipped my crossbody bag and pulled out my smartphone. Its smooth, familiar weight felt like a last connection to the outside world. I placed it on the table. She picked it up, along with my passport, and slid them into a clear plastic bag. The sealing of the bag sounded like the finality of a jail cell locking shut. Now, Ms. Akari, she began, leaning forward slightly, her voice dropping to a low, deliberate tone that sent shivers down my spine. Let's talk about why you're really here. The implication hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud settling over me. My dream vacation had officially transformed into a nightmare. My mind raced, trying to understand what she meant. Why I was really here. I was here for a vacation. That was the truth, the whole truth. But the way she said it, the coldness in her eyes, told me she didn't believe me. Not one bit. And in that isolated, sterile room, with my lifeline gone and my future suddenly terrifyingly uncertain, I felt utterly, completely alone. The grand adventure of America had just begun, but it wasn't the one I had ever imagined. It was a suffocating, terrifying descent into the unknown. The woman, whose name tag simply read Officer Miller, leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. Let's talk about why you're really here, Ms. Akari, she repeated, the words hanging in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. The chill in the room wasn't just from the air conditioning. It was the cold dread creeping up my spine. I told you, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I'm here for a vacation. I have my itinerary, my hotel bookings, my return ticket, everything. My hand instinctively reached for my bag, forgetting for a moment that it had been taken. A wave of helplessness washed over me. Officer Miller's lips thinned into a line. We have reason to believe your intentions are not as innocent as you claim. She paused, letting the statement sink in. We've received intelligence, Ms. Akari, suggesting you might be involved in activities that are not consistent with a tourist visa. My mind reeled. Intelligence. Activities. What was she talking about? I don't understand, I stammered, my voice cracking. I'm a graphic designer from Kyoto. I've never been in trouble in my life. This is all a terrible mistake. She picked up my passport again, flipping through it slowly, as if searching for a hidden message. Your travel history is clean, yes. But that doesn't mean anything. Her eyes met mine, piercing through my fragile composure. Tell me, Ms. Akari, why did you choose to travel alone? Because I wanted to, I said, trying to sound confident. My friends couldn't get time off. I've always dreamed of seeing America. Alone, in a country you've never visited? That's quite adventurous for a young woman from a traditional background, wouldn't you say? Her tone was laced with a subtle insinuation, an unspoken judgment that made my cheeks burn. I am an independent woman, I retorted, a flicker of defiance breaking through my fear. Many people travel alone. Indeed. Many people also travel under false pretenses. She leaned forward again, her elbows on the table. We know a lot about you, Akari. More than you think. My blood ran cold. How much did they know? What could they possibly know? My life was an open book. Work, home, a few hobbies. There were no secrets, no hidden agendas. Yet, her words made me feel exposed, vulnerable. You're making a mistake, I pleaded, my voice rising slightly. Please, just check my documents again. Call my workplace, my family. They'll tell you I'm telling the truth. Officer Miller merely shook her head. We don't need to call anyone, Ms. Akari. We have our sources. And our sources tell us a very different story about your arrival here today. She let the silence hang, a suffocating blanket. What story? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The terror was a cold hand gripping my throat. She sat back again, her expression unreadable. You will be held for further investigation. For your safety, and for national security, we cannot allow you to enter the country at this time. Held. The word echoed in the sterile room. For how long? Where will I go? That depends on the investigation. You'll be escorted to a secure location within the airport perimeter. She stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. You will not have access to your phone or outside communication. This is for your own good, Ms. Akari.
My stomach churned. This wasn't standard procedure. This was a nightmare. But I haven't done anything wrong. I cried out, desperation coloring my voice. You can't just hold me without cause. Her gaze was unyielding. We have cause. Now, come with me. My legs felt like lead, but I had no choice but to follow. She led me out of the interrogation room and down a seemingly endless corridor, away from the bustling terminal. The sounds of the airport gradually faded, replaced by the humming of unseen machinery and the echo of our footsteps. It felt like I was being led deeper into the belly of some monstrous, indifferent beast. We stopped in front of another plain metal door, this one with a small, reinforced window. Officer Miller inserted a keycard, and the door hissed open, revealing a small, sparsely furnished room. It was even smaller than the interrogation room, with just a single narrow cot bolted to the floor, a small metal table, and a toilet in the corner, separated by a flimsy curtain. There were no windows, no natural light, just the same harsh fluorescent glow. The air was stale and heavy. You will remain here, Officer Miller stated, her voice devoid of any warmth. You will be provided with meals. If you require anything, use the intercom on the wall. She gestured towards a small, grey box near the door. Do not attempt to tamper with anything. Any aggressive behavior will result in further consequences. My eyes scanned the room, my mind refusing to accept what was happening. This was a holding cell. I was a prisoner. But I have a flight back to Japan in 2 weeks. I stammered, clinging to that last shred of normalcy. She paused at the doorway, her hand on the frame. We will address that when the time comes. And then, with a click that resonated with terrifying finality, she closed the door, plunging me into a chilling solitude. Panic, cold and suffocating, washed over me. I pressed my hands against the metal door, as if I could push it open with sheer will. I pounded on it, yelling, "Let me out! This is a mistake. Please." My voice was hoarse, desperate, but there was no response. Only the oppressive silence of the room. I sank to the floor, my knees weak, and wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the violent trembling that racked my body. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging, blurring the stark outlines of the room. How could this be happening? One moment, I was filled with joy and anticipation. The next, I was trapped in a concrete box, accused of an unknown crime. Hours blurred into an indistinguishable stretch of time. My stomach growled with hunger, and my throat was parched. I eventually used the intercom, my voice still trembling, to request water. A few minutes later, a small slot at the bottom of the door slid open, and a gloved hand pushed through a plastic bottle of water and a pre-packaged sandwich. The slot immediately closed again, leaving me feeling even more isolated. I ate mechanically, the food tasteless in my mouth. As darkness, or what I assumed was darkness outside, fell, the air in the room grew heavy with a new kind of dread. The fluorescent light never dimmed, casting an eerie, unchanging glow. I tried to sleep on the hard cot, but every creak and groan of the building, every distant sound, kept me awake. My mind replayed every moment since I landed, searching for a clue, a reason. There was none. I was innocent. Then, sometime in what I assumed was the middle of the night, the door hissed open again. My heart leaped into my throat. Officer Miller stood there, but she wasn't alone. Another man, taller and broader, in a similar uniform, stood behind her, his face shadowed. His eyes, however, seemed to linger on me, a predatory gleam in their depths. "Ms. Akari," Officer Miller said, her voice flat. "We need you to come with us for another round of questions." I pushed myself up, my legs still unsteady. Now, in the middle of the night. "The investigation is ongoing," the male officer spoke, his voice surprisingly deep and gravelly. He stepped forward, entering the room, making it feel even smaller. His presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating. He didn't look at me with the stern, professional gaze of Miller. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, seemed to undress me, linger on my limbs, my chest. A different kind of fear, hot and shameful, began to spread through me. Officer Miller seemed to notice my discomfort, but offered no explanation. "Let's go." They led me not to the previous interrogation room, but to another, even more secluded area. This room was dimly lit, almost cozy in a strange, unsettling way, with a soft, worn carpet and a large padded armchair. The air here was heavy with a faint, cloying scent I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the sterile smell of the airport. It was something warmer, more intimate, and more terrifying. "Sit down, Akari," the male officer said, his voice now a low rumble, devoid of any official pretense. He didn't use Ms., his name tag read, Officer Davis. He gestured to the armchair. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me. This felt wrong. Every fiber of my being recoiled. Why? Why are we here? This isn't the interrogation room. Officer Miller closed the door behind us, her gaze impassive. She remained standing near the door, a silent, watchful presence. Officer Davis, however, walked towards me, his eyes never leaving mine. He was much closer than I was comfortable with, his shadow enveloping me. "Just a more comfortable setting for a deeper conversation, Akari," he said, a slow, unsettling smile spreading across his face. It didn't reach his eyes. "We want to understand you better. Who you really are." He sat down on the edge of the large armchair, not opposite me, but right next to where I would sit, if I chose to. It was an invasion of my personal space, a deliberate act of intimidation. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he must surely hear it. "I've told you everything," I stammered, taking a step back. The scent, I realized, was faint, like an expensive cologne mixed with something musky. It was unsettling. Officer Davis chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "Oh, I don't think so, little one. I think there's a lot more to a Akari than meets the eye. He extended a hand, his large fingers moving towards my arm. It wasn't a comforting gesture. It was a reach. You're a very beautiful woman, Akari. You must know that. My blood ran cold. The implications of his words, combined with the dim lighting, the isolated room, and the silent presence of Officer Miller, hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about national security anymore. This was about something far, far worse.
I tried to step away further, but he was quick. His fingers grazed my forearm, a light, almost imperceptible touch, yet it felt like a brand. It sent a jolt of pure terror through me. My skin crawled. "Don't be shy," he murmured, his voice now a low purr. "We're all friends here. Just getting to know each other." Officer Miller remained silent, her face a mask, providing no reassurance, no intervention. She was complicit. The realization made my stomach drop. There was no escape. I was completely at their mercy. He moved closer, his other hand coming to rest lightly on my hip. The touch felt like a violation, even through my clothes. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to fight, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear and the sheer impossibility of my situation. I was a foreign woman, alone, in a secure facility, completely cut off from the world. No one knew where I was. "Such soft skin," he whispered, his thumb tracing a slow, deliberate path up my side. The words were like a physical assault. My eyes darted to Officer Miller, pleading for help, for recognition of the horror unfolding, but her gaze remained empty, a silent affirmation of what was to come. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated terror, and a profound, bone-deep shame that had nothing to do with anything I had done. This was the moment my dream of America shattered, replaced by a dark, unspeakable reality that would forever stain my soul. The long, terrifying night had just begun, and I knew with a horrifying certainty that it would not end with just questions. The touch of Officer Davis's hand on my hip was not just a physical contact. It was a psychological violation, a sudden, brutal shattering of every boundary I possessed. My breath hitched, caught in my throat, as his thumb slowly, deliberately, began to trace circles on my side, just above the waistband of my jeans. Officer Miller remained by the door, a silent, unmoving sentinel, her presence a chilling affirmation that no help would come from her. The dim lighting in the room, the strange, musky scent, and the overwhelming proximity of Officer Davis created an atmosphere thick with dread. "Such soft skin," he murmured again, his voice a low, gravelly hum that vibrated through me. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, stared into mine, not with anger, but with a disturbing sense of ownership. "You're a long way from home, Akari. No one here knows you." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "No one to hear you, no one to help you." My mind screamed. Every instinct urged me to fight, to scream, to push him away, but my body felt locked, paralyzed by a terror so profound it turned my limbs to lead. I was trapped. Utterly, completely trapped. My eyes darted frantically between his face and Officer Miller's, searching for a flicker of humanity, a sign of intervention. There was none. Only complicity. He chuckled, a soft, dry sound that grated on my nerves. "Don't look so scared, little one. We're just having a friendly chat. Getting to know you better." His hand moved from my hip, slowly, deliberately, upward, over my ribs, grazing the side of my breast. My entire body stiffened, a silent gasp caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, wishing I could disappear, willing this nightmare to be just that, a dream from which I would soon wake. When I opened them again, he was still there, his smile wider, more predatory. "Relax, Akari. It's just us." He pulled me gently, firmly, down onto the armchair, settling himself beside me, his thigh pressing against mine. The contact was sickening, burning through my clothes. "See. Much more comfortable, isn't it?" I could only shake my head, tears blurring my vision. My voice failed me. I was choking on my fear, on the bitter taste of helplessness. What followed that night blurred into a horrifying montage of forced intimacy and profound violation. Officer Davis, with Officer Miller as his silent accomplice, systematically stripped away not just my clothes, but my dignity, my agency, my very self. His touch, initially hesitant, grew bolder, more demanding. He talked to me in a low, suggestive voice, praising my body, telling me how lucky I was, how special I was to be chosen. His words twisted the blade of violation deeper, attempting to poison my mind as well as my body. I remember the coldness of the floor against my bare skin, the rough fabric of his uniform against my cheek, the metallic tang of fear in my mouth. I remember the silent, watchful gaze of Officer Miller, a phantom presence that solidified the horror of my situation. There was no escape, no voice to hear my pleas. Every whimper, every sob, every desperate protest was swallowed by the thick, soundproof walls of that room. My body was no longer my own. It was an object to be used, examined, and discarded. The memory of their combined weight, their harsh breath on my neck, the feeling of being utterly consumed, would forever haunt my senses. It was a suffocating, terrifying descent into a private hell. The days that followed blurred into a horrifying routine. The small, windowless cell became my world, a stark prison of beige walls and fluorescent light. Meals were pushed through the slot in the door, tasteless pre-packaged food that I ate only because my body, stubbornly, demanded sustenance. But hunger was the least of my concerns. The true torment came at irregular intervals, usually in the late hours of the night or the early morning, when the airport was supposedly quiet. The familiar hiss of the door opening would send a jolt of ice through my veins. It was never just one officer. Sometimes it was Officer Davis, his unsettling smile always present, his eyes full of the same dark hunger. Other times, it was different faces, men I hadn't seen before, all with the same knowing, predatory gaze. And almost always, Officer Miller was there, her presence a silent, chilling endorsement of their actions. Each encounter was a new layer of humiliation, a fresh wound carved into my soul. They varied in their cruelty, but the underlying theme was always the same. My body was theirs to command. There were moments of forced gentleness, whispers of beautiful and good girl, that were far more terrifying than any overt threat, because they sought to manipulate, to confuse, to erode my sense of right and wrong. They told me I was lucky to be chosen, that they enjoyed me, implying that I should be grateful. My mind struggled to reconcile these words with the brutal reality of their actions. Sometimes it was just one of them, his breath hot on my ear, his hands exploring every inch of my trembling body. He would talk to me, his voice a low murmur, telling me things that made my skin crawl, describing what he was doing, what he wanted to do. I learned to detach, to float above my body, watching from a distance as it was used, defiled. It was the only way to survive, to keep a tiny part of myself safe from their reach.
But then there were the other times, the times that shattered my already fractured mind. The times when they came together. 2, sometimes 3 of them. The sheer overwhelming presence of multiple bodies, the confusion of hands, the disorienting chorus of their voices, left me breathless, gasping for air that felt thick with their desires. It was a horrifying symphony of forced intimacy, each man taking his turn, or acting in unison, their combined weight pressing me down, erasing me. The line between pain and a sickening, forced sensation blurred, leaving me in a state of confused terror. My body, exhausted and bruised, would sometimes betray me with an involuntary shiver, a reaction to the sheer intensity of the forced contact, which they would interpret as pleasure, feeding their own depravity. See, Akari, you like it. You're made for this. Their words were a constant assault, trying to break my spirit, to make me believe the lies. I began to lose track of time. Days blended into nights, marked only by the arrival of meals and the terrifying visits. My internal clock was shattered. Hunger and thirst were constant companions, but the deeper, more profound hunger was for freedom, for dignity, for the simple act of being human again. I longed for the sun on my face, the sound of my own language, the touch of a friendly hand. Sleep became a rare commodity, haunted by nightmares even when it came. I would wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for a phone that wasn't there, screaming into a silence that swallowed my cries. My body was constantly sore, a perpetual ache residing in my bones. I looked at myself in the small, reflective surface of the toilet, barely recognizing the gaunt, haunted woman staring back. My eyes were dull, my hair matted, my spirit almost entirely extinguished. They had also started to play psychological games. Officer Davis, in particular, enjoyed toying with me. He would bring me little gifts, a small packet of Japanese snacks, a cheap hair tie, things that were supposed to be comforting, but only served to highlight my captivity. "Thinking of you, Akari," he'd purr, his eyes glinting with amusement as I shrunk away. He would sometimes tell me that my family had forgotten about me, that no one was looking for me, that I was simply a lost file. He fed me lies, weaving a web of despair that made my hope dwindle to a tiny, flickering flame. I tried, in my moments of clarity, to recall every detail of my life before this. My family's faces, the smell of my mother's cooking, the vibrant chaos of Shibuya, the quiet tranquility of a temple garden. I clung to these memories like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. They were the last vestiges of who I was, before I became simply Akari, the captive, the object of their desires. There were moments, brief, terrifying moments, where a strange, unsettling sensation would ripple through me during the assaults. A fleeting, involuntary physical response to the sheer intensity, to the desperate attempt of my body to process the overwhelming sensory input. It would last for only a fraction of a second, quickly overtaken by the terror and the profound disgust, but it was enough for them to latch onto. "See, Akari, you like it. You're enjoying yourself," they'd sneer, twisting the knife of psychological torment. It made me hate my own body, hate myself, for betraying me in such a vile way. I would sob silently afterward, the shame burning hotter than any physical pain, hating that they had found yet another way to soil me. The thought of escape was a distant, unreachable star. Where would I go? Who would believe me? They were officers, men of authority, within the confines of an airport, a place of maximum security. They controlled everything. My passport, my phone, my very existence. I was an anonymous face, swallowed by the vast, indifferent machinery of the system. My voice, if I could even find it, would be drowned out by their power, their lies. Yet, deep within me, buried beneath layers of fear and despair, a tiny ember refused to die. It was the memory of my old self, the vibrant Akari who dared to dream of America. She whispered to me, in the darkest moments, that I had to survive, that I had to get out. But how? The how remained a terrifying, impossible question, hanging in the suffocating silence of my cell. The only answer I received was the constant, horrifying reminder of my new reality. The rhythmic, unsettling click of the door, signaling another visit, another violation. My American dream had been hijacked, twisted into an endless, inescapable nightmare of human degradation. And I was trapped, a silent scream in a soundproof room. The days bled into each other, each a monotonous cycle of fear, hunger, and the soul-crushing visits. My body became a canvas of silent pain, my spirit a flickering ember against the gale of their cruelty. I learned to anticipate the soft click of the door, the low hum of the fluorescent lights in the corridor, the unsettling scent that preceded their arrival. Each time, a new wave of nausea would wash over me, a chilling realization that I was about to endure another descent into their depravity. My mind, in its desperate attempt to cope, began to play tricks on me. I would drift in and out of consciousness, sometimes dreaming of Kyoto, of the vibrant colors of cherry blossoms and the comforting sound of my mother's voice. These brief respites were always brutally interrupted by the harsh reality of my captivity, leaving me gasping, disoriented, and more desperate than ever. One afternoon, or what I assumed was afternoon based on the routine, the slot in the door opened and a new face appeared, pushing through my meal. It wasn't one of the officers who had hurt me, nor was it Officer Miller. This man was younger, perhaps in his late 20s, with kind, tired eyes that seemed to hold a flicker of something human. He had a slight, almost imperceptible scar above his left eyebrow. As he pushed the tray through, his fingers brushed mine. Unlike the others, his touch wasn't predatory. It was quick, almost apologetic. "Here you go," he mumbled, his voice soft, almost hesitant, not the usual gruff command. He glanced quickly over his shoulder, as if afraid of being watched, before his eyes met mine for a fleeting second. In that brief exchange, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks, a spark of empathy. He quickly retracted his hand and closed the slot, but the moment left a tiny, fragile seed of hope in my chest. Could he be different? Could he help?
The thought gnawed at me for the rest of the day. Was it foolish to hope? Every other officer had been complicit, or worse. Yet, that fleeting glance, that soft touch, felt like a beacon in my suffocating darkness. The next time he delivered my meal, I tried to speak. "Please," I whispered, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Please help me. I haven't done anything wrong." His eyes widened slightly, and he glanced around nervously. "I can't," he whispered back, his voice barely audible. "Just try to stay strong." He quickly slid the tray through and shut the slot. My heart sank. Hope, it seemed, was a cruel mirage. But then, as he turned to leave, I saw him drop something small and metallic near the door, just out of sight of the camera in the corner. It was quick, deliberate, and almost imperceptible. My eyes locked onto the spot. After he was gone, I crawled towards the door, my muscles aching, my heart pounding. My fingers fumbled in the shadows until they closed around a small, flat object. It was a hairpin. Not just any hairpin, but a sturdy, thick one, like those used to secure a police uniform. A tiny, almost imperceptible key for a tiny, almost imperceptible lock. Or perhaps, a way to test the ventilation grates. A tool. A surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp, shot through me. This was it. A chance. However small, however desperate, it was a chance. My hands trembled as I clutched the hairpin, the metal warm against my clammy skin. This young officer, this stranger with the kind eyes, had given me a weapon. A weapon against my confinement. Over the next few days, I meticulously examined every inch of my cell, searching for a weakness. The cot was bolted down, the toilet secured. The walls were solid. But then my eyes fell on the ventilation grate high on the wall, near the ceiling. It was small, but perhaps large enough for my slender frame if I could get the cover off. My heart pounded with a renewed, desperate energy. Late one night, after the guards had done their rounds and the silence of the facility had deepened, I began to work. I stood on the small metal table, straining to reach the grate. The hairpin was awkward, too soft to be a proper tool, but I used it to prod and scrape at the edges of the screws. My fingers cramped, my shoulders burned, but I persisted. Hours passed. Each tiny scrape, each nearly imperceptible loosening of a screw, felt like a monumental victory. My determination was fueled by a fierce, burning hatred for my captors, and an even fiercer desire for freedom. Just as I felt one of the screws finally loosen enough for me to manipulate, the door to my cell hissed open. My blood ran cold. Officer Davis stood there, his usual unsettling smile plastered on his face, accompanied by two other officers I hadn't seen before. My heart plummeted to my stomach. He saw me standing on the table, the hairpin clutched in my hand, my desperate attempt at freedom exposed. His smile vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Well, Well, Akari. What do we have here? Trying to escape, were we? His voice was low, menacing. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, caught in the harsh glare of the fluorescent light, the hairpin a pathetic weapon in my trembling hand. Get down, he commanded, his voice like ice. I slowly descended from the table, my legs trembling so violently I thought I would collapse. The hairpin slipped from my fingers, clattering loudly on the concrete floor. It sounded like the death knell of my last hope. Officer Davis walked over to me, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. He picked up the hairpin, examining it with a mocking smirk. Naughty. Naughty. Akari. Did you really think you could get away? He paused. Then his eyes flickered to the ventilation grate, where the screws were now visibly loose. Ah. So that's your little plan, huh? Quite resourceful. He then turned to the other two officers. She needs to be reminded of her place. She clearly hasn't learned her lesson. The punishment was swift and brutal. They didn't take me to the dim, carpeted room this time. They used my own cell. The small space, usually a source of claustrophobic dread, now became a stage for their cruelty. Officer Miller wasn't present this time, but the two new officers, even more faceless and indifferent, joined Officer Davis. The assault was a blur of pain, humiliation, and a terrifying sense of absolute powerlessness. They were relentless, their anger at my attempted escape translating into a terrifying escalation of their abuse. My body screamed, but no sound escaped my throat. I simply endured, wishing for oblivion. After they left, the door locking with its usual sickening finality, I lay on the cold floor, bruised and broken, both physically and emotionally. The loose screws on the ventilation grate mocked me, a cruel reminder of my failed attempt. The hairpin lay abandoned on the floor, useless, a symbol of my shattered hopes. Tears, hot and endless, streamed down my face. This time, they were not just tears of fear or pain, but of utter despair. The brief flicker of hope, ignited by the kind officer and the hairpin, had been brutally extinguished, leaving behind only ashes and a deeper, darker void. I had dared to dream of freedom, and for that, I had been punished. I crawled onto the cot, curling into a fetal position, my arms wrapped around myself as if to hold my broken pieces together. My body ached in places I didn't even know existed, but the pain in my heart was far worse. I was trapped. Truly, irrevocably trapped. They had taken everything from me. My freedom, my dignity, my very self. Now they had taken my hope. I closed my eyes, but there was no escaping the haunting images. Their faces, their hands, their cruel words, all played on a loop in my mind. I was a prisoner in every sense of the word, confined not just by the walls of my cell, but by the overwhelming weight of their power, their control. Sleep eventually claimed me, a merciful escape into unconsciousness, but even in its depths, the nightmares pursued me. I dreamt of endless corridors, of being chased by shadows, of screaming without a sound. When I woke, the harsh fluorescent light was still burning, my body still aching. I stumbled to the small reflective surface of the toilet, needing to see myself, to confirm my own existence. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of light. Her face was gaunt, streaked with dried tears. This wasn't Akari. This was a shell, a ghost. My vibrant, hopeful self, the girl who had dreamed of America, was gone. She had been swallowed whole by the darkness of this place, by the unspeakable acts I had endured. The thought of escape now seemed utterly futile, a childish fantasy. They were too powerful, too vigilant. I was a bird with clipped wings, in a cage with no exit. All that was left was to endure, to survive moment by agonizing moment. But for how long? And at what cost to what little remained of my soul? The vast, indifferent machinery of the airport hummed on, oblivious to the silent terror unfolding within its secure walls. And I, Akari, was just a forgotten whisper in its monstrous heart.
The despair that had consumed me after my failed escape attempt was a heavy shroud, muffling my senses and dulling the sharp edges of my pain. I moved through the days like a ghost, an echo of my former self. The visits continued, a relentless reminder of my captivity, but I retreated further inward, a fragile core of my being trying desperately to survive the constant onslaught. I ate less, spoke even less, and found solace only in the blank expanse of the ceiling, imagining endless blue skies beyond the concrete. Yet, even in the deepest pits of my desolation, something stubborn flickered. It was the memory of that young officer, the one who had left the hairpin. His kind eyes, the slight scar. He had risked something for me. He had shown a sliver of humanity in this cold, heartless place. That memory, small and fragile as it was, refused to be entirely extinguished. It was a tiny whisper of a world where not everyone was a monster. One morning, after a particularly brutal night, I lay curled on the cot, my body a mass of aches, my mind numb. The metallic taste of fear was ever present. The door hissed open, and Officer Davis entered, his usual smug grin in place. He wasn't alone. This time, he had brought an older officer, whose face was a patchwork of deep lines, and whose eyes held a weary, distant look. They had a brief, hushed conversation, too low for me to understand, but their postures were tense. It seemed something was amiss. Officer Davis then walked over to me, kicking my foot lightly to get my attention. "Wake up, Akari. We have a problem." My eyes flickered open, but I didn't move. Problems for them usually meant more pain for me. "One of our guys, he's been found out," Davis continued, a note of agitation in his voice. "The one who helped you. He tried to report us." "Stupid fool." He spat the words with contempt. "Now we have a mess to clean up. And it means you, little bird, are an even bigger liability." My heart gave a painful lurch. The kind officer. He had tried to help me. And now he was in trouble because of it. A surge of guilt, hot and sharp, pierced through my numbness. But with it came something else, a spark. A fierce, burning anger. He had risked everything for me. I couldn't just lie here and let his sacrifice be in vain. I had to try. For him, if not for myself. Officer Davis was pacing now, a rare display of nervousness. "They're tightening security, investigating everything. We have to move you. Immediately." He barked orders at the older officer, who began collecting some of my few paltry belongings, the plastic water bottle, the leftover sandwich wrapper. "We're taking her to a different sector. A more discreet one. No cameras there, less traffic." Davis muttered, more to himself than to me. "This is going to be a pain in the ass." He grabbed my arm, yanking me roughly to my feet. My muscles protested, but the adrenaline was already coursing through me. This was it. A transfer. A change in routine. A potential opening. They led me out of the cell, not down the familiar long corridor, but through a series of narrow, winding service passages I had never seen before. The air was colder here, filled with the hum of pipes and the distant rumble of machinery. The walls were bare concrete, marked with various maintenance warnings. There were fewer lights, casting long, shifting shadows. This was the underbelly of the airport, the hidden pathways. The older officer walked ahead, seemingly scouting, while Davis kept a firm grip on my arm, pushing me forward. He was distracted, muttering under his breath about the idiot who had tried to expose them, about the increased scrutiny they were facing. His usual confident swagger was replaced by a simmering frustration. His guard was down. Just slightly. My mind, for the first time in weeks, was clear, hyper-focused. I absorbed every detail. The turn of a corner, the glint of a fire extinguisher, the clang of a distant door. I noticed a large, heavy service trolley parked near a maintenance access door, laden with equipment. My eyes darted to the door itself. It had a simple push bar, not a keycard reader. It was likely an emergency exit, or for staff use with internal access only. But if they were distracted enough. As we rounded a particularly dark corner, the older officer paused, gesturing for Davis to wait. "Hold up, Davis. I think I heard something down that vent." He pointed to a low grate near the floor. "Could be a rat. Or worse." Davis grunted, his grip on my arm momentarily loosening as he strained to listen. "Damn it, not now. We need to move." But his attention was momentarily diverted, his head cocked, listening intently to the faint scuttling sound. This was my moment. With a sudden burst of energy I didn't know I possessed, I yanked my arm free from Davis's loosened grasp. He was caught off guard, his head still turned towards the vent. Without thinking, without planning, purely on instinct, I pushed him with all my might towards the wall. He stumbled, cursing, thrown off balance by the unexpected force. "Hey!" he roared, lunging for me, but I was already moving. I didn't run towards the way we came. I didn't run further into the unknown passages. My eyes were fixed on the service trolley. I darted towards it, my bare feet slapping against the cold concrete. The older officer, startled by the commotion, was just turning around, his eyes widening in surprise. I reached the trolley, a heavy, unwieldy thing, and with a desperate shove, I sent it careening towards the older officer. It crashed into him, sending equipment clattering to the floor. He yelped, momentarily tangled in the wires and tools. It wouldn't hold him for long, but it bought me precious seconds. My gaze snapped to the push-bar door, just beyond the struggling officer. It was my only way out. "Get her!" Davis yelled, now recovered and lunging after me. Fear lent me a speed I didn't know I possessed. I sprinted, my lungs burning, the taste of adrenaline metallic on my tongue. The sounds of their shouts, their heavy footsteps, echoed behind me. Every nerve ending screamed. My body was battered, but my will to live, to escape, had ignited into a raging inferno. I reached the door, my trembling hand slamming against the push-bar. It gave way with a satisfying click, and the heavy door swung outward, revealing a blast of fresh, cool air. And beyond it, not another corridor, not another sterile room, but a dimly lit service road, leading to what looked like the perimeter of the airport. It was night, the sky a vast expanse of dark gray, with the distant glitter of city lights.
I didn't hesitate. I burst through the door, my bare feet hitting rough asphalt. The shouts of the officers behind me grew louder. "Stop her! Don't let her get away!" I ran blindly, fueled by sheer terror and the desperate need for freedom. The air was cold on my skin, raising goosebumps, but it felt exhilarating, real, after weeks of stale, recycled air. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed harder, forcing my battered body forward. I could hear their heavy footsteps pounding behind me, closer now. They were faster, stronger. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Officer Davis was gaining on me, his face contorted in a furious snarl. Ahead, in the distance, I saw the shimmering lights of what looked like a fence, and beyond it, the faint outlines of trees. Freedom. It was so close. But they were closer. I pushed myself to my absolute limit, every muscle screaming in protest. The airport perimeter fence loomed closer, a tall, chain-link barrier. It was higher than I expected, with barbed wire coiling along the top. My heart sank. How would I get over it? Then, just as I thought they would catch me, I saw it. A small, rusted maintenance gate, half hidden by overgrown bushes, a little further down the fence line. It wasn't fully closed. It looked like it had been left ajar, perhaps due to neglect. Hope surged through me, a powerful, intoxicating force. I swerved, veering off the road and plunging into the rough, unkempt grass towards the gate. Thorns and sharp weeds scratched at my legs, but I barely felt it. "She's heading for the gate," Davis roared, his voice closer now, dangerously close. I reached the gate, my hands scrabbling at the rough metal. It groaned, stiff and rusty, but it gave way. I squeezed through the narrow opening, tearing my clothes, scraping my skin, but I didn't care. I was out. I stumbled through the other side, into a dense thicket of trees and overgrown brush. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and damp earth. I could hear their shouts, frantic and angry, just beyond the gate. I didn't stop. I plunged deeper into the darkness of the trees, branches whipping against my face, tearing at my hair. My lungs burned, my legs threatened to give out, but the primal urge to escape propelled me forward. The sounds of the airport, the shouts of my captors, slowly began to fade behind me, replaced by the rustle of leaves, the chirping of unseen insects, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I was no longer trapped. I was running. Running towards an unknown future, but running free. The night air, cold and unforgiving, felt like the purest breath of liberation. I had survived. I had escaped. And now, the terrifying journey of staying free, of finding my way back to myself, had truly begun. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing into a heap beneath the cool, embracing darkness of the trees. The frantic shouts of my captors had long since faded, replaced by the symphony of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the night wind. I lay there, gasping for air, the rough earth cool against my cheek. My body screamed in protest, every muscle ached, every scrape and bruise throbbed, but underneath the physical pain was a surge of something powerful: freedom. It was a raw, exhilarating sensation, mingled with a terror that clawed at my throat. I was free, yes, but utterly alone, disoriented, and vulnerable in a foreign land. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly pushed myself up. My clothes were torn, my hair tangled with twigs and leaves, and my bare feet were cut and bruised. I looked around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The distant glow of city lights painted the horizon, a tantalizing beacon of civilization. The air smelled of damp earth and something industrial, a faint reminder of the airport I had just escaped. I began to walk, my steps hesitant at first, then gaining a desperate momentum. I had no idea where I was going, only that I had to get as far away from that place as possible. I stumbled through the undergrowth, guided by the faint glow of the city. The cold night air chilled me to the bone, but I hardly noticed. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and a desperate, primal need for safety. Eventually, the trees thinned, and I found myself on the edge of a deserted, dimly lit road. It was narrow and winding, not a major highway. I saw the occasional car pass by, their headlights momentarily illuminating my disheveled state before disappearing into the darkness. Each one was a potential threat, or a potential savior. My heart pounded every time I heard an engine approach. I kept walking, hugging the shadows at the side of the road. My throat was parched, and my stomach growled with an insistent hunger. I tried to remember the layout of LA, the districts I had seen on maps. This didn't look like any of them. I was truly lost. Hours passed. The sky began to lighten, a faint blush of orange and pink appearing on the eastern horizon. The world slowly awakened around me. Distant birds chirped, and the air grew colder just before dawn. As the light increased, I saw more of my surroundings. Open fields, the occasional small building in the distance, but no signs of life or help. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me again, I spotted it. A small, roadside diner, its neon sign flickering weakly, still showing open. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. People. Safety. Maybe. I approached cautiously, my heart still pounding. Through the grimy window, I could see a few patrons inside, hunched over coffee cups, bathed in the warm yellow glow of the interior. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself, though I knew I must look like a feral creature. My reflection in the window showed a haunted, wild-eyed woman, far from the polished Akari who had boarded the plane. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside. The warmth, the smell of coffee and bacon, the low murmur of voices. It was an overwhelming assault on senses accustomed to sterile silence. Every head in the diner turned to stare at me. I could feel their eyes on my torn clothes, my disheveled hair, my bruised face. Shame burned through me, hot and stinging, but the desperate need for help was stronger. I spotted the counter, and behind it, a woman with kind eyes and a worn apron. She was wiping down the counter, and her gaze, unlike the others, was not judgmental but filled with a flicker of concern. "Please," I croaked, my voice raw and unused. I need help." My English, usually precise, was faltering. "Airport, bad men, escape." The words tumbled out, disjointed and desperate. The kind woman's eyes widened. She put down her rag and walked towards me, her face creasing with worry. "Honey, what happened to you? You look like you've been through hell." Her voice was soft, compassionate. It was the first truly kind voice I had heard in weeks. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring her face. I was held, I managed, a sob escaping my throat. They took me from the airport." The memories of Officer Davis and the others flooded my mind, making me tremble violently.
She gently took my arm, her touch surprisingly comforting. "Come on, sit down. Let's get you some water." She led me to a secluded booth in the corner, away from the other patrons, who had thankfully returned to their breakfasts, though their glances still lingered. She brought me a large glass of ice water and a warm, sweet pastry. "Eat, honey. We'll figure this out." As I drank the water, savoring its cold relief, and ate the pastry, a small measure of strength returned to my body. I then recounted my horrifying ordeal, stumbling through the words, the shame and trauma making it difficult to speak. I told her about arriving at LAX, the interrogation, the hidden room, the officers, and the unspeakable things they had done to me. I told her about the kind officer who had tried to help, and my desperate escape. The woman listened patiently, her face growing increasingly grim. Her name was Maria. She was a single mother, running this diner for years. When I finished, she sat back, her eyes filled with a quiet fury. "Those monsters," she whispered, her voice tight. "To do that to anyone, let alone a young girl alone in a new country." She shook her head. "We need to get you to the authorities. The real ones." My heart clenched. The police. But they were police. Airport police. Who will believe me? The memory of their power, their uniforms, their authority, still terrified me. They were the law. Maria took my hand, squeezing it firmly. "Not all police are like that, honey. And what they did to you, that's a crime, a serious one. We'll go to the local sheriff's department. They're good people out here. And we'll get you to a doctor." The idea of going to another official, of recounting the horror again, made me sick to my stomach. But Maria's conviction, her steady gaze, gave me a fragile sense of hope. She saw me not as a victim, but as someone who deserved justice. After I had eaten a proper meal, Maria closed the diner, putting a "closed for emergency" sign on the door. She led me to her old, beat-up pickup truck. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the fields. The world felt vast and intimidating, but Maria's presence beside me, her quiet determination, was a lifeline. The drive to the sheriff's department was short but agonizing. My mind was a flurry of what-ifs, doubts, and the terrifying prospect of reliving the trauma. When we arrived, Maria walked me inside, her arm protectively around my shoulders. The officers at the sheriff's department were different. Their eyes were kind, their questions gentle. They listened with grave expressions as Maria explained what I had told her. Then, a female detective, Detective Ramirez, took over. She spoke softly, patiently, her eyes filled with genuine empathy. She got me fresh clothes, a warm blanket, and a cup of soothing tea. Recounting the full horror of my captivity was agonizing. Each word tore open a fresh wound, forcing me to confront the memories I had tried so desperately to bury. But Detective Ramirez listened without judgment, her face a picture of grim determination. She believed me. That, in itself, was a powerful balm to my battered soul. The hours that followed were a blur of medical examinations, interviews, and the terrifying realization that this was just the beginning of a long, arduous journey. They promised me protection, legal aid, and psychological support. They told me they would investigate, that they would find those officers. It felt like an impossible promise, but for the first time since I stepped off that plane, I felt a glimmer of justice, a tiny seed of hope that their power would not be absolute. I called my parents in Japan, borrowing a phone from Detective Ramirez. My mother's voice, when she answered, was filled with a familiar warmth that instantly brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's Akari. I'm safe now. I'm okay." I couldn't tell them everything yet, not the full horror, but just hearing their voices was like a cleansing rain on my parched soul. They cried, I cried, and for a moment, the vast distance between us seemed to shrink. The physical wounds would heal, slowly. The mental scars, I knew, would remain forever. But I was out of the shadows. I was no longer a voiceless prisoner. My journey to America, a dream that had turned into a nightmare, was now transforming into a desperate fight for justice, for healing, and for reclaiming the woman I was, before the darkness tried to consume me. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in weeks, I could see a faint, distant light. I was a survivor, and I would fight to live again.